Shut up and sit down.
I am a radical libertarian.
And we don't want the government to do a damn thing.
The current state of politics is unsustainable, politically, economically.
You deserve better.
It is about supporting, platforming, and assisting the people who are out here actually doing the fight.
You just take an issue that's important to you and do something.
There you go.
You are part of that declaration against tyranny.
Because no one brings tear gas to a gunfight.
This conversation gives me a little more hope for the future.
The one, the only.
Fight for liberty. This is the cherry on top.
This is FSM.
Hello, and welcome back to Fight for Liberty. I'm your host, David Fite, here to get you pumped up about the men and women who are out here making the world a freer, happier, and more harmonious place. But first, I'm going to do a quick PSA for those of you that follow me on Twitter, the David Fite, right here. If you get a DM from me, don't open it. Don't click the link that it sent. That account just got hacked like 10 minutes ago, so don't do that. Be careful. Don't answer my DMs on Twitter. Free speech media is still fine, which we're still streaming on right now, thankfully. But don't open anything from the David Fite or David the Fite, my backup. They both just got hacked. Tonight, we have a returning guest coming on to talk about his book that I'm very excited about. But first, as always, we're going to hear from the main sponsors of the show. First up, Proud Libertarian. Be a proud libertarian yourself and get all of the best liberty swag in one place. You can find hats, t-shirts, books, yard signs, bumper stickers, and so much more at proudlibertarian.com. If you're looking for a last-minute Mother's Day gift or something fun to take to the beach with you, they've got towels and fun. They've just got everything you could possibly want to help promote the fact that you are a libertarian and wear it proudly, literally on your sleeve. So go on over to proudlibertarian.com. Use promo code FreeSpeechCorp to get 10% off your first order. Again, it's proudlibertarian.com. Promo code FreeSpeechCorp. And go beyond shrooms with Zoom. From Advanced Mycology, the makers of Shroom and the Mycadelic Grow Bags, comes a clean, safe, legal, and pure tablet designed for meaningful experiences. Mitocin is a natural psilocybin analog that provides a shorter, cleaner trip with the same euphoric, groundbreaking results. And most importantly, it is completely legal in all 50 states still. So you can go to zoomtrip.com, that's XUMTRIP.com, to learn more about Mitocin, the dosages, and shipping info, and everything else. And I cannot recommend these enough. The people that make them are some of the most genuine people I've gotten to work with, who personally test every batch to assure quality experiences for their customers. You can get a nice tester pack of 4 for just $20. So go on over to advancedmyco.com to order yours today, and you can use promo code FSM for $5 off your first order. Again, that's advancedmyco.com, promo code FSM. And we are so very grateful for those sponsors. But without further ado, joining us tonight, we have businessman, economist, former vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, and now author, the one and only Mr. Mike ter Maat. Welcome back to the show, good sir.
Well, thank you. That's more introduction than I deserve. It's good to be with you, David. I want to point out to your audience that it is not true that I am the guy who hacked into your DM. It was not me.
I've got somebody accused Lars of it already too. So
it's more likely Lars. I don't mean from the standpoint of ethics. That's not something Lars would do. But at least he would have the technical skills to do it if he chose.
That is fair. Real quick before we get too far into it, how have you been? What have you been up to? I haven't really heard too much from you in the last probably year, I think, since we've really talked too much since the RLC split.
No, we've been in different circles, haven't we? Joined the Republican Liberty Caucus in June with a team of folks, about 45 of us, joined the Republican Liberty Caucus and the Republican Party, and have been working at that ever since, promoting the RLC, going to a lot of meetings. You know, when you join a party for the first time in, I don't know, 15, 16 years, there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into meeting as many folks as possible. I'll be in Norfolk tomorrow, for example, with the Republican committee there, and spend a lot of time going around Virginia. I'll be out your way in June for the Republican convention for the state of Texas.
Nice.
And then in Indiana for the Republican convention there later on in June. And then I'll be at Freedom Fest.
Hell yeah. I will.
Freedom Fest in July. And I should point out, not only will we be there with the book, which in fairness, you characterized it as something that you didn't actually say this, but your audience may have gotten the impression that I wrote the whole thing. I served as editor. I wrote a little bit. But it was my job to recruit the authors and to edit the pieces and get the whole thing to fit together and just write a little bit of it. We'll be there not only with the book at Freedom Fest, but we're going to be making an announcement at Freedom Fest. So that's fun and exciting. I hope you'll be there, or at least some of your viewership will be there.
Currently, the plan is for me to be there. We'll see how traveling logistics and everything with the kiddos end up working out. But currently, the plan is to be there, and I've got a spot on Media Row, so I'm kind of excited because I've only ever worked.
Spot of your own, or you're sharing one?
Spot of my own.
That's awesome. Well, I want to come by after our announcement and talk to you about that.
Hell yeah. I'll definitely keep you updated on whether or not that ends up happening, because I love Freedom Fest. It's one of the coolest events that we put on in the movement, I think, every year.
I think it is arguably the coolest.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's about the right size. You know, there's a lot of people there. It's a fairly big event.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, it's not too big. It's not like there's 20,000 people there and it's crushing and it's uncomfortable from a physical, experiential standpoint.
Yeah.
It's a nice size. You see a lot of people that you haven't seen for a while. You get a lot of, obviously a lot of members of the Libertarian Party. You get some members of the Republican Party. You get a lot of folks who wouldn't join a political party with a gun to their head.
That's my favorite part about it, is it's one of the only events that routinely brings in people who are not already under the umbrella. You know what I mean? Like it's the kind of place where people like Rob Schneider can get invited and kind of massaged into the movement, or no,
I think that's right. Rob Schneider is one of those guys you're not going to bump into him at the Piggly Wiggly, right? Or at the Safeway, or Food Lion, or the Jewel, or the Osco, and you're not going to bump into him. I don't think you're going to bump into him at a conservative conference. I don't think you're going to bump into a guy like that at a Republican Party meeting. I don't think you're going to bump into him at the Libertarian Party convention.
Yeah.
Although, not impossible, right? Just unlikely. But yeah, that's a really interesting point. Same with bail me out. What's his name? I was gonna get a job, but I got high.
Oh, Afro-Man.
Afro-Man. We saw Afro-Man at Freedom Fest last year, or the year before. And that was kind of fun. Not the kind of guy you're probably going to bump into at the Republican Convention of Texas.
Probably not. He's done a few LP conventions, but even that is kind of few and far between.
And it's been a while.
Well, while we're talking about him, I'm curious to get your opinion. He just teased in a Reason interview the other day that he's considering running for the LP nomination for president. As someone who's done that previously, what's your opinion on that?
Well, if he's into it, the more the merrier, in the sense that there's no such thing as bad competition. I would not, how do I put this politely? It does not seem obvious to me that he would be a terribly competitive candidate. And that's for a couple of different reasons. One is that he just presents himself as someone who's not interested in politics.
Yeah.
Maybe someone who's interested in policy, maybe someone who's interested in the way the world works and wish it would work better. I don't mean he's not a thoughtful guy, but he doesn't present himself as someone who is interested in getting votes and kissing donors' asses, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
even the 24 campaign.
Maybe I'm wrong about that, but
yeah, because even when he did the independent run last time, it was very social media heavy and kind of seemed like more of a gimmick than an actual campaign. He had some decent policy write-up. Whoever did his website did an okay job from that perspective.
Good for them. Good for them.
The campaign itself didn't do much.
The other thing I would worry about is that he's just naturally associated with a sliver of the spectrum of policies that members of the Libertarian Party care about.
Yeah, that is true. I think a lot of people would see him, even if he said all of the right things in the primary, a lot of people would see him as like exclusively a pro-pot kind of candidate, in the same way that like Lars got railroaded by the like adult friend finder stuff, where it doesn't matter how much you actually explain it away and reason it and like explain yourself, it doesn't matter to half the delegates. They're just going to hear that first one thing.
It is a challenge. And, that's an interesting example. I might argue that I thought Lars did a pretty good job of, for the most part, surmounting that challenge. I might point to Arnold Schwarzenegger and Ronald Reagan became governors of California, and they started out with a particular brand. I'm trying to think of other examples. Everyone thought Richard Nixon was a jerk until he became president, and then we found out he really was a jerk. So that's just my humorous example. I'm sure there are examples of people who we thought were narrowly branded and overcame that. Yeah, but it's hard. To your point, it's hard. It would be hard.
Yeah, it would definitely be one of the more charismatic races we've run in a while. That would be kind of fun.
Well, and there is a certain challenge to that as well. If you were, say, Mike ter Maat, you would have to overcome this prior perception that you were boring. And I don't know where people get that. I don't know where, but that can be a hill to climb.
Yeah,
right.
There were definitely more boring mics in the race last time. That's for sure.
It's a competition. I'm not sure I can give that to you. But thank you for that throw.
I don't dog on Rechtenwald often, but that one was too easy of a joke to make. But yeah, that was definitely something I heard a lot.
Times and has been interesting at times since then. Possibly not uniformly in ways that he would look back on and say, that was managed.
Yeah, give him a gummy and he's interesting.
If you want to say that's what it was, you say that's what it was.
There you go. So tell me a little bit more about what you guys are doing with the RLC and kind of what prompted that and some of the thought process behind it.
What the heck is up with that?
I definitely wasn't one of the... I was one of the people that wasn't mad about that. That's for sure. But I'm curious from your perspective how that came about.
Yeah, no, you can be mad and curious, or I suppose you could be neither too. A lot of people were neither mad nor curious, right? And that's its own form of disappointment. The number of people who are neither mad nor curious. Look, to start out with the big picture, I believe then quite strongly, and since then, I think it has been borne out that the debate that's going to matter in the United States, arguably around the world, the debate that's going to matter over the next couple of years, 3, 4, 5, 6 years maybe, is going to happen inside the Republican Party. The debate that's going to matter in politics on this particular planet is going to happen inside the Republican Party, inside the United States, because I believe that the Republican Party is the game in town. Trust me when I say it brings me no joy to suggest that neither the Libertarian Party nor the Democratic Party are what I would characterize as to the starting line in terms of engaging the American people in a healthy dialogue. I think the Libertarian Party's messaging is largely on point. I just think that the Libertarian Party has not figured out how to engage enough Americans, being the third party in a two-party system, right? Mm-hmm. Not any fault of anyone in the Libertarian Party. The Democratic Party, on the other hand, it is their fault, okay? It is their fault. They are one of the two parties in a two-party system.
Yeah.
They do have ample access to the American electorate. No question about that. They get people elected. They get presidents elected from time to time.
Yeah.
And their messaging absolutely sucks. And the reason it sucks is because their thoughts, that might be a little bit harsh.
I was with you. That's fair.
Their focus sucks. Their prioritization. I just don't think, I really mean they're not to the starting line. What I mean by that is they haven't figured out what they've done wrong in the past couple of decades.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly a handful have. I don't mean no one has figured this out. But by and large, it would be hard to argue that the bulk of politicians inside the Democratic Party have figured out that they need to turn hard in one direction or another. I don't think most of them behave in a way that would suggest they realize that. I do believe that a larger proportion of people who identify as Democratic voters have figured that out than the proportion of politicians in the Democratic Party.
I'd agree with
that. I
think
the Democratic Party leadership is out of touch with the Democratic Party. So anyway, I think the debate that's going to matter is, how does the Republican Party define itself in the wake of Donald Trump leaving office?
Yeah.
And it seems to me that some of that will cut along what we might characterize as libertarian lines, meaning on one side, you might have, and by the way, I might even say the smart money is betting on, much to my chagrin, a side that says, more nationalism, possibly more centralization, possibly more authoritarianism, more interventionism in terms of both international conflict and in our economy. A lot of stuff that is at odds, not only is at odds with, us as libertarians, but it is at odds with what the Republican Party has traditionally stood for. And to be frank, at odds with what we would characterize as the classically liberal tradition of American politics.
Right.
That's just not, there's some real 18th century shit going on. And
yeah.
And that was fine for the 18th century, right? I mean, if you're born before Adam Smith and you haven't seen the American Revolution and the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence and the French Revolution, if you haven't seen all that, that's fine. You got to pass.
Right.
But, if this is 2026 and you're pounding tariffs and invading Iran and, I think you need some rethinking to do. And then on the other side of that debate, I think is a push more toward what we would recognize as traditional GOP stuff, closer to LP types of things. The basics, fiscal conservatism, less spending, primarily is what I mean by that. Less interventionism, a less militaristic foreign policy, which is not where the GOP has been. The Republican Party has been home to a lot of neocon stuff, right? But a lot of folks who are optimistic about Donald Trump, not everyone was optimistic about Donald Trump, but those who were so in no small measure because his center of gravity seemed to be less war, right? I think a lot of folks are calling that into question the last few months.
Yeah.
But anyway, less war, more free markets, pay more attention to the importance of protecting our medical freedom.
Yeah.
How many folks would say that, you're a young guy, so, you're going to get a pass on this and you're allowed to criticize folks in my generation if you want to. Wait until I'm off and then you can make fun of me. But clearly, we should have been paying more attention to this 20 years ago than we were. Right?
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say, I was the smart one, everyone else was stupid. I mean, 20 years ago, we just didn't spend enough time thinking that the government could leverage a virus or anything else, right?
Yeah.
Into doing some of the stuff that they did. It's hard to be creative when thinking about the stupid things that your government might do, because in fairness to my generation, the government was doing a lot of stupid things that were distracting.
Yeah.
Right? In 2001, we had war and we had the FISA courts and bugging American citizens. And, before that, to bring up Richard Nixon again, that was a huge watershed moment when we went through the 1970s and learned that we probably shouldn't have been trusting politicians as much as we were.
Right.
So, in fairness to my generation, it was, if you had not gone through Watergate yet, right? We went through Watergate when I was like 13. If you had not gone through what, I think about my parents' generation, right? I don't think there's no way she could have imagined the government doing the weird stuff that it did, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. There's no way. You could have told her in 1972, the government's going to do this in 50 years. No.
Right.
Our government's stupid, but it's not that unethical.
It's not evil. Yeah.
Not evil, Mike. It's not evil. And, in 72, I probably would have said, you know what, Mom, you're right. It's unethical and it does stupid things, but it's not evil. It wouldn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember growing up, my dad had a certain kind of feeling about the flu shots that he mostly kept to himself. He wasn't like one of those like anti-vaxxer types. He's never been allowed about anything type. Right. He's a very, I keep my opinions to myself type of a person, but shared them with me as I was growing up. And
what generation is your dad? Is your dad like what, my age or what?
He's Gen X. He's in his like mid 60s now.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, my age. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember, we still got a flu shot every year, like that. I remember growing up, but my parents didn't always get one, right? Because they were less at risk. And I like as soon as I turned like 16, 17 and stopped going to my yearly checkups with my mom, that like would make me go to the checkup and get a flu shot. I haven't gotten a flu shot in 10 years now,
right?
And I don't intend to, because I would rather get the flu than trust the government, because it's And the thing he always pointed out about it is that he always said, I don't think there's anything wrong with the flu shot right now. What I worry about is that when they have 100% of the population taking a shot every year without asking any questions about it, what can they put in that shot without us knowing later on down the road?
Absolutely. And the other thing, if I can speak for our generation, your dad's and my generation, the way we would have said it would have been probably slightly less conspiratorial, but more worried about how stupid. We were the generation that recognized the government was more stupid than evil, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The way most of us, I was born in 1961, most of us would have said it something along the lines of, once everyone is taking it and the government discovers there's something wrong with it, they will move heaven and earth to cover it up.
Yeah.
And because they're in bed with the manufacturers in so many cases and vice versa, there's all kinds of incentives to not tell you what the downsides are.
Mm-hmm.
And if it happens after a certain period of time, then, there's liability and everything else that, potentially attaches. And this is before the law was enacted to give these companies more carte blanche than they used to have in regard to the liability that would attach to side effects. So, yeah, your dad's generation and mine were the ones that were just, figuring out that the CIA was not on our side. The CIA is on the CIA's side, right?
Right. And that is the only side that they are on.
It's exactly right. One of the things that I like to say that, folks on our team say is that the United States is broken into two teams. Politics has broken into two teams. On one team, you've got the crazy people on the left who say things in order to divide us and advance their political ambitions, along with people on the right who say crazy things to divide us and advance their political ambitions. And then on the other team is all the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
I truly
95%.
believe that most politicians on the left and the right have more in common with each other across the aisle than they have in common with us.
Yes. Completely agree. Yeah, I think
they may use different tactics. They may use different language.
Mm-hmm.
But, you change some of the nouns. Most of the verbs are the same. The crazy stuff they say, it's the same playbook. They might be fighting for different things to spend money on. Or in many cases, they're fighting over the same things to spend money on, but, maybe in a different state or under a different president.
Mm-hmm.
But truly, even when they disagree, it's not in a way that aligns with the interests of the rest of us.
Right. Yeah, I think pretty much everybody is against the renewing of the FISA courts, but they're in DC saying, oh, well, if you add this to it or that to it, then maybe we'll pass it. Even the people that I would have maybe too optimistically been expecting them to be a no vote regardless, because they are actually principled politicians somewhat, like a Marjorie Taylor Greene, or she's not there anymore. It's Boebert was the one.
Oh, but good example. Good example.
But Lauren Boebert was posting that, if they put the Save America Act into the FISA re-upping or whatever, that she would vote for it. And I'm like, this is you don't just get to throw the Constitution out as a bargaining chip to get the thing that you want passed. That's bullshit.
Well, you're exactly right. The other thing that's crazy about it is that they're negotiating in advance. Like, no one is trying to shove that package down your throat.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that you're signaling in advance that you would give in to that? I mean, you're basically, if you're negotiating in public in advance of the final hour at which you need to make a weird decision, you're basically announcing, I have no principles. I'm just trying to get as big a bite of the apple as I can.
Right.
No, it's insane. I agree with you. I am quite surprised. This is an interesting example. I'm quite surprised that there's not more pushback regarding renewal. By the way, I'm quite surprised that there's not more pushback regarding, the NSA and the CIA more generally. I'm really surprised. And it drives home the point that to make changes in politics, you typically need to change the players.
Yes.
It's very difficult to change how, unless you're Joe Biden and you just started out with absolutely no principles, and by the time you're at the end of your career, you literally can't remember the beginning of your career. Aside from people like that, most politicians don't change their mind that often.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to replace them. Change requires changing the players.
Yeah, and to a point, that's almost a good thing. I wouldn't want to elect Justin Amash or Thomas Massey just for them to go to Washington and have their mind changed quickly on anything, right? So there's a certain benefit to the idea of them being as stubborn as they are. I think I would rather they be like that so we can look at their voting record, see how they're going to be forever, and then either vote them out or keep them in. Sure. Having them be wishy-washy and easily change their mind.
That's a really interesting point, and it speaks to the importance of having some turnover rather than having these idiots stay in power for
70 plus years,
20, 25 years. It just creates a lethargy. It also sets up the institution of how Congress works. Mm-hmm. in a different way. You don't when you don't expect turnover, you get funding and campaigning differently, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone's all about supporting the incumbent, no matter what kind of an idiot he or she might be, right? Money flows.
That's where the smart money is, yeah,
and always has. That's exactly right. And leadership, leadership rewards. Not only does leadership offer rewards to people that have been there a long time, but leadership is a reward for people who have been there a long time. And the institution is just set up not to change very much.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how much people are complaining about Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, right now. So, because it's his fault exclusively that the Save America Act didn't get put on the floor. And as correct as that is, that's just a crazy thing to think about, that we have 100 senators and one of them gets to decide what gets put on the floor or not. And to your other point, I think he's the youngest majority leader in probably 20 or 30 years, because he's
only like 120. Most of them are 180 to 200.
Yeah, I think he's not even that young. Like, I think he's in his late 50s, early 60s, something like that. But I still think that makes him the youngest one in a while.
That's young,
right? It's crazy.
No, it's totally crazy. And the other example is holding up the what's his name from North Carolina, who's on his way out, is holding up hearings for Kevin Warsh to become the new chairman of the Federal Reserve System, because he's pissed off about the Trump administration bringing criminal investigation against the current Fed chairman. I don't know that example is any more interesting or less interesting than any other example, but it makes your point that one senator has a tremendous amount of power, at least in terms of stopping things. Yeah. You would hope that they would use that. You would wish that they would use that to stop spending increases.
Yeah, if only Rand Paul had that much power, then we'd be all right.
And he could exercise that power in a little bit different way. He's in an awkward situation where, he's gearing up to run for president. Yeah. So he has to pick and choose when to set his hair on fire.
Yeah. Yeah, he's in a really rough spot, and Massey's right there with him, where you're trying to not piss off your current base while expanding your base, while staying principled.
It's hard.
While not getting fired.
This is why he didn't become president of the United States in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard.
Yeah.
I would like to see him. I don't think he's got a, huge proportionate likelihood of becoming president of the United States. Yeah. Having said that, I'm wrong about most of my prognostications. So, what do I know? He could be president. I didn't see that coming, right? It could. I didn't think Donald Trump was going to become president either.
Right. I was going to say, I thought he had a better shot than Trump did in 2016. That's for sure. At least he was a sitting senator at the time.
We know God's in charge and she ain't telling us. Mm. So, you know, I would like to see Rand run as principled a campaign as possible, given that the value that's going to come out of it is going to be one of articulating a message, making a point, educating people, and giving people guts.
Yeah.
You know, the big one is you may not make it cool to be a libertarian all of a sudden, but you could make it slightly less uncool.
A little bit more palatable, the way his dad did it.
That's exactly right. His dad did make it cool for a handful of folks.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe cool is setting the bar too high, but less unacceptable.
Yeah. And I definitely think that, you know, Ron did more in his 08 and 2012 campaign than he did in his 88 campaign. That's for sure. You know, to your original point of the debate happening inside the GOP and not on the general election ballot.
Yep.
I think the Massey's primary is going to be a huge thing. Like whether he wins or loses,
we're going to learn a lot from it.
Yeah. Having been in his district a decent amount this year, I still have fairly high hopes.
People there love him. Not everyone.
Yeah.
but a lot of people in that district are big Thomas Massey fans. I can definitely see him pulling this off.
He's had long enough to establish enough personal relationships in his district that I think is going to be the difference maker. That Ed, not even to his discredit or anything, as much as I hate him as a person and a politician, yeah, it's not his fault that he's not the incumbent and new to this, but he just doesn't have the same level of personal attachment to the district that Massey does. I think that's going to be the difference maker. Personally, I hope.
Incumbency brings enormous advantage.
Yeah.
Just the familiarity.
Like an almost daily basis on the internet, that even plenty of them from Kentucky's 4th that are, oh, he votes with the Democrats. He's a rhino. He's a Democrat in disguise. He's a socialist. He's a this and that. And they genuinely believe this shit because that's what Fox News told them to believe. And it doesn't matter.
All because he wouldn't vote with the president. Which does bring up an interesting point. As long as I'm fulfilling the role of the old person in this conversation, let me point, as someone who was a member of the Republican Party, throughout the 90s, certainly, when I worked for the campaign was 92. I worked for the White House in 90, 91, 92. First of all, Donald Trump had recently been a Democrat, right? The 80s, Donald Trump was a Democrat. No question about it. New York Democrat.
Yeah.
Meaning you would not mistake him for a Republican. The principles of the Republican Party never aligned with where the Donald was coming from. And he never, he never had a reason to suggest otherwise. And he never really pretended to be a Republican. At some point, he switched parties, but, at no point did he set his hair on fire and make you to believe that he was a libertarian in terms of his fiscal policy and skeptical of big institutions. None of this crap. Crap, right? No, forget about it. If you become president of the United States and you're head of the Republican Party, ostensibly and effectively, and your movement needs another name, you are definitionally rhino.
Yeah.
That's what rhino means. It literally means Republican in name only.
Yeah.
If you look at his current positions, now you may love them, right? And that's okay. You can be a Donald Trump fan. It's a free country. You can be a Donald Trump fan, but that's not the same as being a traditional Republican. And by traditional, I don't mean a traditional person. I don't even mean a conservative person. I just mean someone who believes in what the Republican Party generally views as the bread and butter of politics.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was screaming it from the rooftops even in 2016 that, like, just stop falling for this shit. This is a lifelong New York City liberal Democrat. He was pro-weed and gay marriage before Hillary or Obama were. He has always been, pro-choice, especially for himself. And, a philandering piece of shit. Like,
right, which was not officially acceptable in the Democratic Party either, but it certainly spoke to a certain libertine personal ethic as opposed to a conservative who was, lying awake at night worrying about how he's going to suck up to evangelicals, right?
Right. That's why I remember I wore my Tulsi campaign t-shirt to a church function when I was home visiting in 2020 or 2019, I guess. This was around Christmas time.
By home, you mean in Florida?
New York.
New York. I can't keep track of where you are.
I'm all over the place.
Yeah. Where in New York? In the city?
It was the upstate central, like Syracuse area, is where my parents are. And
nice.
I had
spent 5 years in upstate New York. I'm a big fan.
Oh, I'm sorry. I still like it most of the time. But I had one of the people I actually really respected from my church came up to me or my parents' church at the time because I had moved on, but and had a probably almost 15-20 minute conversation with me in the narthex of the church about how bad of a person I was for supporting a Democrat.
Wow.
And this person's main issue was abortion, and that the Democrats are all for killing babies, and Tulsi supports killing babies, and you have to support Trump, or else
that's a lot of
killing babies.
That's a lot of dot connecting, right?
Right.
You're a Tulsi fan, therefore you're a fan of everything going on in the Democratic Party. Therefore, you're pro-choice. Therefore, you're for killing babies. Therefore, you're a bad person. That's a lot of dots to connect. By the way, I'm sorry that you were a Tulsi fan. How's that going? I think some of us had. I'll speak first, so you can make fun of me if you want. I think some of us had, let me say, high hopes, right? I don't want to quite go to high expectations, but an optimism about Tulsi, right? Here is someone who maybe wasn't steeped in the business of the CIA, but she'd been in the service, elected official, grown-ass political adult, right? Independent-minded. I think that's fair to say independent-minded. I thought interesting choice to take over the security complex. Maybe she could rattle the cage a little bit. I'm not saying I thought she was going to sunset the CIA like I would love to see, right? Break up the NSA into little pieces and feed them to the Defense Department. That would be cool, by the way. But I don't mean that we thought she was going to do that. But at the very least, rattle the cage.
Yeah.
And I don't think you could argue that she has done that.
Not very well. She accidentally she has a few times, like with the Iran nuclear report that she gave like a couple weeks beforehand, and then everybody was like, wait, you just said this other shit, what is going on here?
I think she got her own cage rattled.
I would say I also had high hopes when Trump picked her as the DNI head, and yeah, it was definitely kind of an interest, like a fun little thing for me to be able to say that I have the director of national intelligence's cell phone number on my phone. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, no, that's fun.
But
meaning it's probably listening to you right now.
Right. But by that time, I had already kind of, because she had just a terrible list of endorsements in 22. Like, she endorsed Chuck Grassley for
I didn't see
his
that coming.
Senate reelection in 22.
Yeah.
She was like on the campaign trail with I'm gonna space on his name, but the Republican candidate for Senate in New Hampshire in that cycle, who ended up losing, I believe.
Yep.
But super pro-war China hawk style Republican candidate that she backed.
Yeah, foreign policy's progress in the last couple of years has really left her behind.
Yeah.
You know, she's a little bit old school for her generation, for being a relative youngster. She's out of step with where the zeitgeist is going.
Yeah. I think there was a massive misunderstanding of her opinions when she was running for president, because everybody thought she was anti-war.
Yeah.
And she is not. She is
no.
anti-regime change war. She's anti 20 years to just not do anything about anything war. She was against basically every military intervention we were actively doing in 2019 when she started running. But she was still adamantly defending her joining the military in 2001, adamantly defending the, Desert Storm and a bunch of this other war on terror stuff.
Yeah.
And
she's what I would call sort of a good government type.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a distinction to be drawn between people who recognize that I hate black and white, but there's almost no such thing as good government, right?
Yeah.
Almost no such thing. You know, you could imagine the Defense Department being run well. You can imagine your local government doing things well, or at least you could identify what it is you want. You know, what you want your fire department to do, what you want your police department to do, what you want your waterworks to do, right? And your pothole fillers. And you could say the same thing about the Defense Department and the Treasury and the State Department. You could articulate what you want them to do. But in the main, I think folks like you and I would say that there's very, very little that we won't want the government to continue to do.
Yeah.
We want much less government. Then there's other folks who may be just as skeptical of our existing political institutions, but see the path to success as merely reforming them. These are folks that I would view as good government types.
Yeah. There's some of them in the LP even.
Sure. And that's great. You know, I mean, you do you. But this is what I would say about Bobby Kennedy, for example. You know, when I would talk to the Maha folks, the big difference between him and libertarians, and he didn't get this in trying to reach out to libertarians, is that he's a good government type. He wants government to work better. You know, he wants the government to go after these bad people who are, pushing bad drugs and, polluting the environment. And I don't even mean to say that that's stupid. I'm not trying to argue that he's a bad person or a dummy. I don't think he's either one. But he's a good government type. He's not a libertarian, and there's a difference. And you see that in domestic policy more easily. But I think that there are good government types in foreign policy as well, and I think that that's what Tulsi is.
Yeah, she's very much I will speak out when I feel like the government is doing something wrong, but I'm also going to promote the government still doing things, and if I think it's right, which I'd agree. RFK is in that same camp, it was weird to see, to your point earlier about how Trump campaigned. I feel like that's the biggest vote block that he was able to get in 24 was the quote unquote like good government types, the people who genuinely believed, oh, well, if we vote for him, things could actually go well.
Sure.
And he got all of those types of people. He got Rogan and RFK and Tulsi and a whole bunch of these ex-Democrats, full-blown lefties, pot smoking, mushroom doing, like just crazy
not
people.
That there's anything wrong with that. I know.
No, not at all. They're just not usually the type of people that you would classify as like a hard right-winger, which is what everybody calls Rogan now, just because he supported Trump, who also isn't a right-winger. It's like we had a bunch of Democrats endorse a Democrat and everybody lost their mind because they were in the Republican Party.
Yeah, it's very strange because I always considered myself, for example, to be a conservative because I'm sort of, personally conservative, right? Mm-hmm. I was raised in the church and taught don't do anything stupid or, bad things are going to happen to you. Right. And which is probably true, by the way. and it's just kind of, how my family lived and grew up, and Republicans, right?
Yeah.
And then I see people like Joe Rogan and Donald Trump and Tulsi Gabbard trying to pass themselves off as Republicans, and I just literally don't recognize them.
Yeah.
And then they try to push this idea that they're sort of libertarian. No, you're not. You're a Democrat who's frustrated with the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party went woke and you didn't. Good for you, by the way. That's a good thing that you disagreed with the Democratic Party, but that doesn't make you a libertarian.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Tulsi is probably the closest of all of those to an actual Republican, because she is at least, anti-substances, extremely religious, married. She's on her second marriage, so you could maybe throw some shade for that, but for the most part, she's a very personally very conservative person. One of the more conservative people I've ever met. She doesn't drink coffee. That's the level of no, she has never in her life. She is 44 years old. She has never once in her life drank coffee because it is a mind-altering substance.
Wow.
Yeah, that level of the spectrum of conservative. So,
yeah,
she at least kind of
makes me look loosey-goosey.
Right. It was so weird being on that campaign sometimes because everyone's a vegan. No one drinks coffee. So there was no coffee in the campaign house. There was no meat in the campaign house. There was no drugs in the campaign house. It was wild.
Could you function? What did you have?
I spent a lot of time at Burger King.
What did you have on your pizzas?
It was interesting. Yeah, I almost every time I got any kind of money, I would instantly go to Burger King or McDonald's and get a burger just because I'm I need meat.
Well, I should say that was one of of all the things that we did wrong in the 1992 re-election campaign for George Herbert Walker Bush. Many, many things we did wrong. We did eat well.
There you go. But yeah, that's why even back to the dude at the church that I was talking to, I told him this to his face. I was I promise you that Tulsi has had less abortions than Trump has had people have. Less of her kids have been aborted than Trump's. Guarantee it. If you want to talk about who's pro-life and who's pro-killing babies, I guarantee you Trump has killed some of his babies. Without a doubt. Obviously we don't, to the best of my knowledge, there's no objective, we definitely know that, but it's a pretty safe bet.
I don't know. This is not my wheelhouse, but at this point, nothing would surprise me.
Right. But yeah, Tulsi was an interesting one, and I still think she's doing an interestingly good job of keeping, just kind of keeping her head down and not causing too much of a fuss.
She's had a hard time with her relationship with the president has been up and down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so she's better off just not being in the news the way that like Bongino and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi have been just.
Yeah, there is such a thing as bad PR, we're finding out if you're in the Trump administration. Yeah. I don't understand what motivates someone like Tulsi at this point. You know, what do you get out of bed in the morning for? You know, what is it you're trying to do? Because if it's just a matter of doing what the president tells you to do, that's a long day. That's a long week. You know, get your ass fired. You know, someone like Tulsi Gabbard, it's not like she's not going to find a job. You know, she's not going to starve. I mean, it's not like she needs this job. She'd be the hero to many if she got fired for the right reason. I don't mean, you know, for being a nincompoop, but if maybe not the president himself, but standing up to other folks in the administration who just want her to kowtow to whatever it is the administration is doing at the moment.
Yeah.
I think she'd be a hero to many inside of the party and outside of the party. And that's not a bad thing. You know, we're all going down for the count. You might as well go down swinging.
Yeah. Yeah, I think not to, you know, project what I think she might be thinking too much, but from my interactions with her, she seems like the type of person that would stick it out in a position like that, because if she goes, her replacement is inevitably going to be worse. So she's better off in that position, trying to keep her head down, trying to stop as many bad things from happening as she can stop, and then just trying to ride out the 4 years and just, you know, not let somebody like a Dan Bongino, who's just going to do whatever psychopathic shit he's told to do, be in that position. It's a toss-up whether or not it's truly all the way worth it, but I feel like that's probably her motivation at this point, is just like, you know, I've only got 2 years left. We're already almost halfway done with it. Might as well just try to get things done.
She may have political ambitions in her future.
That's true too.
And even though folks say that they don't, and even when they mean it, sometimes they can change their mind.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the book.
Sure.
So we've got
the idea behind the book. It's a collection of essays. It's an easy read, even if you don't feel like reading the whole thing at once. It's here. That's my plug. We call it Broken: How American Politics is Driving Civil Unrest, Financial Collapse, and War. And the reason we say that is because American politics is driving civil unrest and financial collapse and war. And what we mean is not in an idiosyncratic way, but in a systemic way, that the incentives that are in place in our world, in our political world, are driving some really bad policies. And much has been said about how we wound up here, you know, our politics being so polarized. I really meant it earlier when I said I think that the crazies on the left and the crazies on the right have more in common with each other than they do with the rest of us.
Yeah.
There's an old adage that soldiers on both sides of a war have more in common than they do with their respective underlying cultures whom they represent, right? Yep. Just from the standpoint of lifestyle and what it is that they do for a living, they have more in common with the people they're shooting at. And I think you could say the same thing about politicians, whether your favorite is on the left or on the right. You have to admit that politicians, by and large, not all of them, but a heck of a lot of politicians have advanced their careers through polarization. Yep. And that has been fostered by, we all know the litany of reasons, right? New technologies and bifurcation of media and dehumanization of the other side. And then the diminution of other institutions in our lives, perhaps most importantly, the church, and giving rise to people taking politics so personally and elevating it to being so important in their lives that the combination of that weird cult-like importance and the polarization is why people can't even talk about it at the dinner table anymore, right? At Thanksgiving. So you get this weird environment where people are adhering to the politics of one fringe or the other. And there is very little incentive for politicians to solve problems. And for the most part, their incentives are such that they do better when the problems are not solved.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The first, I'm going to call it a matter of three different problems. The first one that caught my attention, I grew up as an economist. The first one that I grew up with, that I've been concerned about, that caught my attention, was the pending financial collapse of the federal government. I don't know when I use the word pending. I don't mean it's going to be tomorrow at 3, but the path that I don't know that it won't be either, by the way. The path that we're on is not sustainable unless we do something really profoundly differently.
Mm-hmm.
The federal government is going to miss, at the very least, an interest payment in, a decade. Maybe it's more or less than a decade. I don't know, but at some point, it's not 35 years. Let's put it that way. We're not going to go on this path that we're on now for the next 3 or 4 decades, and the federal government is going to be okay. That's not how this works. At some point, math matters.
Yeah.
And we have a political system that just keeps spending money and allowing the government to borrow it. And part of it is how the Federal Reserve operates, and some of it is how the Senate operates, and some of it is how the executive branch operates. There is no important federal institution in Washington that's not making its contribution to this problem, right? Yeah. It's not like you can point to, oh, there's the building in Washington, D.C. where all the people work that are trying to stop this, right? There's no such institution like that. Yeah. There are certain institutions that don't care. You can point to the Supreme Court. They're not, actively spending a lot of money, but they're not part of the solution either.
Yeah. So
we just have this machine that keeps going. And the more that our team thought about it, we started thinking about the fact that really applies to more than just the pending financial collapse. And the two big areas that I think, if you were to funnel all of our problems into 3 buckets, the second bucket we call civil unrest. The idea that we have rioting from time to time. We had rioting in 2020 that was a lot worse than the mainstream media would allow you to believe.
Yeah.
And it depends on your definition of out of control. I don't know what your definition is. It was pretty out of control from time to time on a local level, right? It would not be hard to imagine, in contrast, by the way, to say 1968, 1974. In those circumstances, you did not really think that was going to get out of control.
Yeah.
Take it from me. I was a kid, but take it from me. At no point, my parents were upset about rioting and the death and the destruction and the mayhem, upset about Bobby Kennedy's death and Martin Luther King's death. My family is deeply moved by the assassination of Martin Luther King. I distinctly remember that, even though I was so young. Mm-hmm. But at no point did you think in 1968 and 69 that this rioting was going to escalate to the point where the federal government couldn't control it.
Yeah.
You didn't really think. Kent State was bad. National Guard, killing kids. They weren't there per se to kill kids. I'm not trying to make it sound like that. But you didn't really get the impression it's going to hopscotch from one campus to another, and all of a sudden the United States is going to melt down.
Right.
No.
As bad as Kent State was, they handled the problem. And to your point, like the federal government handled it.
The federal government handled it, and the population in general had no appetite for more.
Right.
We live in a different world today. If I were to tell you it is not possible that rioting might get out of control to the point where National Guard is called in a dozen different states, and eventually regular army is called in, martial law is declared, and that tripped more rioting instead of less, right? People reacted to it badly because of everything that we've been through, not just as libertarians, but as Americans, everything that we've been through over the past decade. People, this time we're not having it, right? And it's not just this group or that group, but Americans have had it. And now the rioting is, as different order of magnitude. And that leads to more martial law, more crackdown. And all of a sudden you've got armed conflict that, maybe you don't use the term civil war, but it certainly rhymes with that, right? If I were to tell you that story and say, that is impossible, you would say, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Let's
we
hope
thought it was going to happen a couple months ago or a month and a half ago.
It's probably not going to happen. You can say it's unlikely. You can say cooler heads will eventually prevail. You can build an argument that says we're not going to let it get that bad. But you cannot, in good conscience, build an argument that says can't happen. If you're worried about that, tighten your screws. Right? That's a very different world. And I worry about that a great deal, given the incentive structure of our politics. And the third bucket is war, which hardly needs further articulation this week, right?
Yeah.
But let me say it a little bit differently than we're saying it this week. Let me zoom out, go to a 30,000 foot level. The United States participates in a lot of armed conflicts. Every few years, we find a new one, right? It's not quite true that we're continuously at war all the time, but damn near.
Yeah.
Damn near. We take a break for an hour now and then, but we make up for it by having two at a time, plenty off. On average, we're in one war all the time.
Yeah, at least my entire lifetime.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. We engage in war so often that there's a certain statistical analysis mindset that's required, in my view, right? In my view. If I were to say, again, make it hard to argue against the possibility. If I were to say the chances of one of these conflicts turning into a nuclear exchange and a nuclear war meltdown, right? The chances of that are really small. But if I said there's zero, you would say, no, I can't give you zero. Can't give you zero. I'll give you a small, right? Venezuela. Really small. But you could imagine, you know what? We went an inch too far, and either the Chinese or the Russians view some state as their client, and they're going to draw a line just like we did with South Vietnam. And they're going to make a point. And we have someone in the White House who says, I don't care if you're going to make a point. It's our hemisphere. You go pound sand. We're going to do whatever we want. And we're going to double down militarily to make that point. You can imagine that getting out of control. Likely? No, not likely. Okay. How unlikely? Let me make up a number. Let me say 1 in 50. Not likely. 2% chance. Okay. Now, over the course of your lifetime, I'm going to tell you that's going to happen 50 times. Now, how do you feel about 1 in 50? 1 in 50 ain't good if you do it 50 times. 1 in 50 ain't good if you do it once, by the way. Right? Right. But if you do this all the time, as we do, the chances of getting into a nuclear exchange over Iran, not good. Small. But I could make up a story that makes it seem not at all impossible. What if the Iranians don't board the Greek ship like they did today? What if they sunk it? And what if someone in Europe decided That's a NATO Article 5 triggering event. And all of a sudden you've got a bunch of Europeans in the Persian Gulf. What if one of the European nations decided to take this fairly seriously? Seriously enough that the Chinese decided, no, we're not going to put up with this kind of bullshit escalation. We're going to suppress it.
Yeah.
You see where this is going. Each one of these really unlikely to get out of hand. 0% chance? No. And that's why I think it's not merely the fact that Iran is not going well for the United States this week, which it's not. It's not going well.
No.
But in the bigger picture, what I think is the greater risk is that even if we do resolve this, maybe with egg on our face, but we get out and we're at least alive, right? We all look stupid because we're back with, essentially Obama's deal with a few bells and whistles, but at least we're alive. Even if that happens, would you argue, well, we learned our lesson, we're not going to get into another one of these the next couple of years? We say that all the time. We learned our lesson in Korea. We learned our lesson in Vietnam. We learned our lesson in Afghanistan. How many times are we going to have to learn this lesson? That's what I think the greater risk is. And that's what the book is all about. It's just a collection of essays about different ways that we're stupid and how they manifest. And it's a great group. We got guys from the American Institute for Economic Research. We got a Cato guy. We got a Marine. We got a bunch of economists. We got some political analysts. We got some folks that are Republicans, some libertarians. We got members of the Republican Liberty Caucus, and got a whole bunch of people. I don't know what the hell they are.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's a lot of fun, a very fun group of guys, and we're interviewing a bunch of them for video under our Liberty Lens podcast umbrella. So, if anyone's interested in that sort of thing, you can learn more about it at our website, ter.com, which is an easy website to work with, but you'd have to spell it right. So good luck with that.
Yeah, I think to your point, I don't know if I'm even as optimistic as you're articulating it right now, as far as it being such a low chance, especially, if you look back at what triggered World War I.
It didn't start out with
17 times over in the last 12 months. And, we're getting lucky that we're not nothing's actually happening to it. But it was one assassination kicked off one of the second largest war of all time, and the largest war by massive orders of magnitude at the time.
And led into World War II.
Right. Some could argue that really the one assassination caused both.
Yeah, without World War I, you don't have World War II in the same way.
Right. So I really thought taking Maduro was going to have some sort of backlash. Any sort of backlash, whether it was even, tariffs and, economic backlash or something. But somehow we just got away with that like a bully.
Yeah, I was surprised. I share your surprise that, other international powers went along with it. I think it's attributable to the fact that it's in our backyard, and the Russians, I almost said the Soviets, the Russians and the Chinese communists figure that attitude bodes well for them. They want to be able to take care of business in their own backyard. It gives Putin a chance to argue, we stayed out of Venezuela, you stay out of Ukraine.
Yeah, and to your point, same with China and Taiwan. That's a really good point. I had not thought of that at all.
I think that's I think that's how some of those folks think.
That makes sense. That's a pretty solid argument. You guys could have the Western Hemisphere, we get the Eastern Hemisphere.
It makes it very hard for the United States to say, we're the moral high ground. American exceptionalism. We get to boss the other people around in the world because of our ethics and our protection of individual liberty as manifested in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and our 250-year history. That argument becomes very difficult when you just ousted the head of the Venezuelan government.
Yeah. Very difficult. And then, we're doing basically the same thing in Iran, where we're just assassinating leaders there.
That's
taking
exactly
out
right.
like the entire top 2 levels of their government, supposedly.
And then we complain about how difficult it is to communicate with their leadership.
Right? It's like, maybe you shouldn't have blown them up then.
Yeah. Yeah. We didn't set ourselves up as well for negotiation as maybe we could have with a little forethought.
Yeah. And to your point about even like on the civil unrest side of it, I genuinely thought that things were going to get a lot worse after Alex Peretti. Like a lot worse. And they did get a little bit worse, but not really. If anything, I genuinely think it scared some people into shutting up. And
you may be
away.
right. Getting rid of Kristi Noem was a very good thing. Sending what's his name to Minneapolis from Homeland Security was a good idea. Sending a grown adult with some police experience was a good idea. I think that Donald Trump showed his Democratic Party history side of being a little bit skeptical of just, how smart are cops, right?
Right.
And personally, I thought the police behavior in Minneapolis was awful. And I thought it came from a combination of, they just look like fish out of water. Very poor training, very poor attitude, horrible leadership. Folks on the Democratic side were no help at all, telling Minneapolis police not to help. And by help, I mean crowd control. Federal agents suck at crowd control. Local cops are good at
usually.
Good may not be the right word, but they don't suck at it, right? They're experienced. And most local cops are well motivated to do a good job with crowd control because it's their community. When you're bringing in folks from the outside for crowd control, whether it's National Guard or federal police or regular Army, God forbid, you're asking for a shit show.
Yeah.
And federal cops should not be in a place where you do not have local police support. That's got to be a rule. That ought to be a rule. And if you don't have the support of local police, then you got to be able to say, we're not going. Right? Or we're going in a smaller fashion. We're, maybe targeting here and there, but we're not doing these stupid sweeps. Oh my goodness. And then if you're really upset about that, if you just have your heart set on doing these operations that require lots and lots of federal police and you're not getting local support, then be mad at the local officials.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you go to option C, which is, well, we're going anyway. Because then it just gets dangerous and you look like idiots. And in the grand scheme of things, you set yourself back.
Yeah. I do think it's kind of crazy to look at the numbers and realize that even with all of this, with twice the budget and 3 times the people and all of this other stuff, they're still not even at like 70% the deportations that Biden was doing.
No, they're not good at this.
No, they're which, I'm definitely a little bit more on the pessimistic conspiracy theorist side of things that I think you are. But I personally think that was the intention. The intention was never to actually deport people. The intention was to have 45 people in full body armor and assault rifles marching down the middle of a 4-lane street in a major city, being able to just shoot people indiscriminately and get away with it.
I hope not. I don't have proof you're wrong, but I hope not.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's man, it's definitely an interesting world that we live in now. I think your book is correct that it is broken and getting significantly worse. Does the book offer any solutions or optimism?
I don't know that I would characterize it as optimism. Pieces of solutions, yes, in the sense that some of the advice gets fairly granular.
Okay.
So in that sense, that there definitely are solutions. Let me put it this way: it would be difficult to articulate. It would be difficult to develop solutions if one did not understand all of the concepts in a book like this. I don't mean to suggest this is the only book like this. This is the only book I know of like this. But I'm trying to be careful in case there is another one out there, and I'm sure it's worth a read, right?
Yeah.
But if one were not familiar with material like this, it would be very difficult to develop means by which to climb out. I do think the politics, how do I say this? The politics want to go in a better direction. I think the typical American is sick of where we've been.
Mm-hmm.
That's the good news. That's an important piece of fixing the politics.
Yeah.
So I think what we need, in my view, what we need to do is be able to turn the corner and characterize the way politicians have been up until now as passé, right? If you're a divisive politician, if you're a Republican who says bad things about Democrats and vice versa, irrespective of how true they may be, but if that's your shtick, we got to be able to call that old school. We got to be able to at some point say, oh, that is so 2020. That is so 2016. That is so 2024. And move on beyond that.
Yeah. Especially if you're insulting the voting base of the other party. Like you can, if you're Massey, you can criticize AOC and vice versa. But
when you say a third of all of their supporters are in this bucket of deplorables, that's a problem. That's a problem. If you have, to your point, if you have politicians who truly believe that Republicans are stupid or Democrats are stupid, you know, if your center of gravity politically is based on 75 million people, fellow Americans, are just being stupid, are just low IQ, you might want to go an inch deeper in your analysis. That's how I would put that.
Especially when I think I'm trying to do the math because I was just looking at this, so I should know the number. I think the smallest percentage for a congressman would be like 27% of your constituency is that other thing.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
think with the redistricting, they're guessing there's going to be plenty of like 70 to 75% wins.
Yeah.
That's still going to be the max.
Yeah, but there are a lot of people who think differently than you do. No matter who you are, a heck of a lot of people think differently than you are. You could be the most popular politician in Politicianville.
Yeah.
And there can be a lot of people who think differently than you do. And the fact that that is true and that politicians behave as though it were not true is a mismatch with reality that means not merely that they are naive, but that they are contributing to the problem in this country and undermining our future.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. It's going to be difficult to get a lot of the American people that are also on board with that thought process to stop listening to that kind of crap. You know, the people that are Massey's a rhino because they heard it 4 times on Fox News.
Right.
It's going to be really difficult to get
And that's inside their own party.
Right. And like, to your point, to like the whole point is they're calling him a Democrat as an insult.
Right.
That shouldn't necessarily just be a pejorative. That like, if you're playing football,
and to be clear, Democrats wouldn't have that guy.
No, not even.
I mean, there's nothing about that insult that's accurate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but if you're playing a football game and one of your teammates fumbled, they're not the other team now. Like they're not actively playing for the other team. They didn't change their jersey.
No, it reminds me of Little League, though. To your point, it reminds me of Little League, where the overriding goal is playing time, not winning. Right? Or even academic, high school level sports. So you're not actually rooting for the guys on the field.
Right, you want them to suck so that you get more play time. Take out the starters so that you can get moved up in the
It's the reason why I always thought that high school baseball, any sport, the one I had been involved with, high school baseball, should have had a rule that said everyone gets equal playing time. And then if the league just agreed on that, right, then it wouldn't be a competitive disadvantage and everyone would be rooting for the crappiest guy on the bench is getting as much playing time as the best kid. Mm-hmm. That means everyone's going to be rooting for that crappy kid to play his brains out because he has to, right? Yeah. And why is it? I'm prattling on about this analogy because I do think it's analogous. Why is it that a school district, for example, whether it's the Archdiocese of Miami that oversaw my daughter's high school, or Broward County Public Schools that oversaw my son's high school, why is it that a school district would decide that kids should have different amounts of playing time based on how good they are at the sport? We don't do that in anything else the high school does. We don't say, well, you suck at math, so we're not going to give you as much math class, right?
That would be nice. I think people would enjoy that.
Believe me, I never would have been in chemistry in the first place if we had that rule. And so, we could all benefit in one way or another. But that's not how it works, is it? Until you get to sports, and then all of a sudden you put coaches in charge, and the coaches believe, quite incorrectly, that the appropriate goal for them is to win games. And they all of a sudden forget that they're employed to help these kids turn into emotionally healthy adults, as well as potentially productive adults. Now, because coaches aren't very good at this, you could make rules that hem them in and then let them decide in the context of those rules that I'm going to do everything I can to win. That'd be okay. But the rules have got to make sure that the coaches don't think that it's part of their job to bench kids in order to win games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I prattle on about that analogy because I think that that's how intra-party politics work. You're rooting against people in your own party because, you hate Justin Amash because you want his seat.
Yeah.
It awful, just awful.
Yeah. And I think even the LP isn't immune to that either. There's plenty of people that, want to take down you or Lars because they liked Chase or ter Maat or Rechtenwalder.
Every combination possible. Yeah. There are people right now who hate your guts because you have too much fun.
Oh, yeah. I know that. I am sure there's people that are going to be pissed that I had you back on the show after leaving the party.
And vice versa.
Yeah, probably. Oh, man.
Well, you have my permission to say, you're right, that guy sucks.
Never. I will never be an echo chamber show. If you guys don't want me to if you guys only want me to interview libertarians, then you're watching the wrong show.
Well, they don't have to watch. They don't have to watch.
Yeah. I've got one last question for you, and you are completely free to tell me to go pound sand and not answer this. But what's next for you? Are there any aspirations for the next cycle?
Announcement July 9 at Freedom Fest.
When you said that at the beginning, I was kind of like, I think he might have just answered my last question. But
yeah, July 9 at Freedom Fest, we're making an announcement. And let me say two things about that announcement. One is you're not going to figure it out. Okay? Like, don't even try. And I say that sincerely.
Now I'm already trying.
But as your friend, I'm trying not to, I don't want you to hurt yourself. There's just no way that you could figure it out. Okay? So don't even bother. Okay. The other thing I would say is not only is it not what you might think it is, it's not even what you might think it would be if it weren't what you thought it was.
Okay.
But it is what I believe to be a potentially important campaign, important project. I think that it has the potential to make people think about certain things in American politics differently than they have up until now. And if that is all that we achieve, that would be enough. And yet I do believe that we have an opportunity to achieve quite a bit.
Oh, yeah. Well, I am definitely going to be lying awake tonight trying to figure out what this is, but I will try to take your advice and not try too hard.
No, don't try too hard. And maybe, if you're going to be at Freedom Fest, maybe we can talk about it July 9th or 10th.
It sounds like a plan.
We plan on making the announcement on the 9th on the main stage, approximately the 9th. I don't have time slots yet, but not July 9-ish. And then we're going to do a breakout session on July 10-ish and answer questions about it and start the campaign process.
Hell yeah. While we're on the topic of Freedom Fest, I'll tell the viewers that if you haven't gotten your ticket to Freedom Fest and you're trying to go to Freedom Fest, there is a promo code I believe is Spike 10. Now I got to find it again. That will get you like 10% off your ticket.
That's awesome.
Actually, I texted it to you. That's going to be easier to find it than
you did. You did send it to me some time ago. I had already acquired a group of tickets.
It makes sense. Yeah, I think it should be. I think it's Spike 10, like all caps.
By the way, 10. If anyone wants to go for free and join my campaign, they can reach out to me too.
There you go.
What do you think of that? If you want the other 90% off, if you just want the 10% off, the Spike 10 code is a good idea. And who doesn't want to be associated with Spike anyway? To be able to walk around at Freedom Fest and say, Spike Cohen got me 10% off. I mean, that is a pretty cool thing to say.
Hell yeah.
I may say it anyway. Yeah, even if it's not true, I may just go around saying it.
Oh, sorry. Brian is in the comments. It's Spike 100, not Spike 10, because I think it's $100.
Off?
I think it might be $100 off, not 10%. Brian's getting
$100 would be more than 10%. They're $600 right now. Now I'm confused. Is it 10% or $100, Brian? Brian's not like a bad sci-fi movie. Okay, well maybe. Well, either it almost doesn't matter. Either whether it's $60 or $100, it's worth. Right, it's you're not so lazy that you shouldn't write this down to get $60 or $100 off. But like I say, I think we bought a large block of tickets, and I don't know whether we're going to fill 100% of them. But if there's anyone out there that would like to campaign inside the Republican Party, As a libertarian, you must be liberty-minded. But if you're a liberty-minded Republican and feel like taking on the challenge of a lifetime and not getting paid, or getting paid, I might be able to get you into Freedom Fest for free if you want the other 90% off that Spike can't get for you.
There you go. Well, Mike, thanks so much for coming back on. This is great to catch back up with you.
Thank you. It's a real joy to be with you. It's good to see you. Good to see you looking well and healthy and happy in Central Texas.
Yeah, you as well. We got to make everybody happy, harmonious, and prosperous. That's the goal, right?
And fight like hell.
Amen to that. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Definitely click the link in the description to go get Mike's new book and go read it and learn all of these wonderful things. There's also links in the description for the sponsors and to find us on social media so you can be following us all over. Again, don't click the ones that go to my personal accounts because those are hacked and we're going to spend the next couple of days trying to get them back. But again, Mike, thanks for doing this.
Absolutely. Look forward to doing it again. I hope to talk to you July 9 or 10 in Vegas at Freedom Fest.
Sounds good. All right, guys, again, thanks for watching. Until next time, keep up the fight.